Hey, this is Rob Swanson with the Real Estate Mogul Show. Let's get into it. Hey, what's up, everybody? Rob Swanson back here with another Real Estate Mogul Show. We have, once again, the crew -1 in the studio. I can't believe it. This is 2 weeks in a row that Henry is freaking gone. Like, just gonzo.
It's a new pattern.
Out fly fishing, epic trip, still happening. We're here holding down the fort working, and he's nowhere to be seen, except for all the freaking fish pictures he sends us, which, you know, what we really should have done is throwing those up on the screen to show what he's been up to.
Right. Mike, if you have a pic or two, airdrop it to me right now. I'll get it up on the deck.
Here,
or if Rob does.
I'll airdrop you so that we can we can do that. You know, he thinks these are big fish, but I mean, to be honest with you, here we go. And the airdrop is coming in. There it comes. All right. Hey, today, guys, we're going to be talking about, before we do the crew intro here, while I'm shipping these pictures off to Joe on the buttons, we're going to be talking about landlording. And we're really going to be talking about phase 2 of the Freedom Formula, right? How to begin building your passive cash flow. But inside of that concept and inside of that theory is managing a rental portfolio and managing your cash flow. And that is, it's one of those things that people are afraid of. And I don't think people have to be as afraid of it as they are, especially when we start to break down some of the things that we teach and that we do. So we'll dive into that. I've got the picks off there. I'm going to start myself off before I pass it off today with a little update. You know, so in recent weeks, all of my update, I've been consumed about buying the new airplane, but that's not all I do outside of work, right? Outside of Freedom Soft and coming on the Real Estate Mogul Show here. My wife has a big organic garden in our backyard, and it is a combination of a food garden, a medicine garden, and a garden for beauty. And she loves the flowers to pull in the pollinators and all the insects, and she loves to take stuff out of the garden and use for medicine. The healing elements of plants and natural things are pretty powerful. And then food. And she has a whole section in her garden dedicated to my love of hot peppers. And so what you see here on the screen are not hot peppers, but they're very flavorful peppers. These are green chilies or Anaheims. And this was, you know, a half a week's growth of what was ready. And I've got this many again already ready to pull. And so what I like to do is I like to harvest. And so she grows it and I cook it usually. And I like to cook and she likes to garden. And so in our pepper garden, we have tons of jalapenos, tons of serrano. We have habanero. We have Apache. We have tons of green chilies. We have some Thai chili. We have poblano. That might be it. That's probably it. But we have a lot of different chilies. And I'll tell you what's fun is the Apaches, when they turn red, they kind of think of what is the Little Rascals and Buckwheat, his hair, like that's how Apaches grow.
I didn't see that coming. With a pepper analogy
right.
here, but
that's how they grow, like out like this, and they turn bright red. And when you snap them off and just eat it, they're so freaking hot. Like, they give me the hiccups almost instantly. They're crazy, but they're fun to eat.
Are those the hottest ones you're growing?
Those and the Thai chilies are pretty hot. Yeah. The Apaches and the Thai chilies are pretty hot. Even the Apaches I find hotter than the habaneros.
Really?
And I don't know on the scale if they are, but they feel hotter to me.
Yeah.
But here, so these are the Anaheims, and this is post my roasting. And so what I do is I just roast them on the grill. I want to get one of those big roasters that's got the torch
that you turn over like the old lottery.
That you turn over like
yeah.
Exactly. I want to get one of those. I just haven't ever taken the time to go get one. But I roast them up, and then I pull the skins. I throw them in a paper bag for about a half an hour. They kind of soften.
What does that do?
It
the
softens
steam or the heat or something.
The steam softens the skin from the meat of the pepper.
That makes sense.
And you can just pull the skin right off. And then I throw them down on parchment paper, and I just layer them up, and I throw them in the freezer. And now we have green chilies for whatever we want to use for them all year long. So this is one of my little things I like to do. I like to cook.
Yeah,
Love
you
it.
do like to cook.
Yep.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time.
Food, good parties.
Yep, that's kind of the thing. You guys, what's cracking in your worlds?
Go for it, Mike.
Kids at school.
Yep.
The new rhythm.
Yep.
I'm in this season where everything revolves around them, and I love this season.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But weekends are all about what are we doing this weekend as a family. It's pretty rare. I mean, you guys, Henry especially, bust my chops on why can't I ever go fly fishing.
Yeah.
And this is the season I'm in. I'm loving the season. I still have, and we're trying to take everybody's advice, right? Nobody can bust my chops on this because so many people that I've run into with older kids have said, whether I know them or don't blink, don't miss it, don't whatever. So yep. I know, my updates maybe get boring to listen to. We do as much as we possibly can.
What a dork.
Together with the family. And I was just telling, I was just showing Rob and Joe here in the office. Our girls are currently 8 and 6, and I'm gonna miss this stuff. This is the stuff that I'm gonna remember. When not every day, but almost once a week, when I leave for work in the morning, they hand me a different stuffed animal. And the first time they did this, it was kind of a joke, and they're like, "Hey, Daddy, take so and so to work." And I took them to work, and when I got here, I set them up at my desk, and they were like on my laptop or whatever. And I shot a picture, and I texted back to my wife, and I said, "Hey, tell the girls that whatever the stuffies' names are, they have great names." I said, "They're helping me at work." Well, they got the biggest kick out of this. So now it's become more common that I go to work with 2 stuffed animals. And so this morning I came to work. Only one of my daughters was upstairs when I left, but our youngest was downstairs, and I came to work with a little rubber dinosaur.
Let's see it.
Oh, well, yeah, it is in my pocket.
It is in his pocket.
Come on.
This little guy. So we were at a barbecue yesterday with friends, and they gave her this. And so my morning today was busy, right? I had to knock a few things out and then recording here. And then so what I still have to do is go back to my office and pose the dinosaur. This little rubber dinosaur. Yeah. You want to see it. And
okay. The reason I wanted to see this is because my son had 2 of these, but they were like little little duckies, like little ducks.
Right.
And it's a shooter thing.
Shut up. It is?
Yeah. So look, you put your finger in there.
Come on. I was wondering why some hunter gutted it.
No, yeah. Stick your finger in the front and you shoot it.
Okay. We're in business.
I love it.
So these will be launched around the house.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to my point. This is the little stuff I hope I never forget.
Yeah. And I love the fact that I could snore and you just continued talking and completely ignored me.
He got that story over the finish line for sure.
He got the story across the finish line, and it's convenient how the stuffed animals that have been coming into the office for 14 years are all of a sudden now due to his kids.
I do have an impressive collection of stuffies. Rob, you and I had a conversation a year or 2 ago, and we were talking about the different stages we're at in life, right?
Yeah.
Your youngest is now 21, and I remember this was funny because we had a chuckle about it, and I said, because it just hit me. I was like, Rob, we are in such different phases. I said, your kids are all about to be out of the house. And at the time, and I said, I still have one that's afraid of the vacuum. and we did. She's gotten over that fear now. But our youngest, like maybe a year ago, you turn on the vacuum, she jumps on a couch.
Yeah.
She didn't want anything to do with it.
Hilarious.
And I remember we're at such different phases.
Yeah.
And they're both great.
Yep.
But I'm in this one. And
And when you think about the phases of life, it's no different than people stepping through the phases of the freedom formula. We can still connect. I can tell you, hey, I'm farther along with the older kids thing. You've got kids still coming up through, so I can speak to you about, hey, you're going to hit this. This is going to happen. There's conversation that we can have, and it's no different when you get into a community of people that are all going towards the same outcome. And the outcome here is to raise kids that are of value to the world, right? Of value to themselves, of value to the family, of value to the world, right? Raise great kids. In the freedom formula, it's about creating financial freedom. It's about creating freedoms in life and then being able to pass those freedoms on to your greater community, to the generations that come behind you in the fifth phase, which is the legacy phase, right? And so whether someone's in phase one of generating cash, or phase two of creating cash flow, or phase three where they've hit that accredited investor status and now have the ability to diversify their investment strategy, and this is why this is phase three for us. Most people in the world never get to phase three. They never get the check, I'm an accredited investor, and therefore the government, thanks a lot, keeps most people out of some of the best investment opportunities that can create true wealth and freedom. And so the reason you work to get to phase three, which is attain that accredited investor status, is so that the doors of opportunity open to you like they don't for the masses. And so the analogy here was just the phases of raising kids and having family.
It's a perfect analogy.
We can still have connection.
Yep.
And I can talk to you about things because I've gone ahead. So somebody that's in phase three inside of the community can talk to that person that's in phase one and say, hey, here's some of the roadblocks you're going to hit. Here's some of the stumbling. Here's some of the blind spots that you don't even know exist yet, which is the topic of today's show. We're going to be talking about phase two, which is creating and building your cash flow. Before we dive into that, we do have to throw it over to the show button pusher update over there, Joe.
Official button pusher.
The official button pusher.
That's right. Yeah. Still just kind of in the same. I'm sort of in the mix of both of you guys because I have kids that are 7, 15, and 17. So they're still in school. They're still in these, sports and different things. And then I have 2 kids that are older, 24 and going to be 26. And so they're in more of the, they're out and they're doing their own thing. One works at a library. One just got a job at a school as a PE teacher with where his mom's the vice principal. So yeah, man, just a lot fun stuff going on. Just engaged with them and, enjoying life.
Love it.
Yeah,
love it. My younger brother, but he's got to be older than me with kids that old. Holy crap.
That's right. I got busy right away.
I love it. Well, guys, let's do this. Let's make that turn into the conversation on a real estate related topic. How do you make that jump from the cash generating phase into the cash flow creation phase? And my approach, and there's different approaches, right? When you get into cash flow creation phase, there's a couple of ways you can tackle it. You can acquire assets, not manage them, cross your fingers and hope. Doesn't work out very well. You can acquire assets. You can personally manage every phase of it. Tenant qualification, tenant selection, tenant management, maintenance, collections, the whole thing. You can manage your own portfolio. Or third, you can hire a manager and you can manage the manager. Now, depending on the scale that you get to, there comes a point in scale where bringing the management inside of your own investment operation makes some sense, and you bring management inside as a division of your portfolio or your investment company. But most people should probably manage the manager. They should hire a property manager and they should manage the manager. Now, different people will have different opinions. I personally like that because does it cost me a little bit more? Yes. But at the end of the day, does it? Probably not, as long as I'm managing the manager. Because here's why I say this. If I were to self-manage the portfolio, I'm probably not going to be as efficient. And this assumes, let's say that it's Rob managing my own portfolio. I'm not going to be as efficient and as speedy on tenant recovery, tenant turn, tenant management, maintenance, all of that stuff as a manager will be if I'm managing the manager, managing their effort and their work, because I've got other things to do as well. And so loss of rent, extended vacancies, things that would probably happen if I managed it myself or if I didn't manage it at all, the loss of income would probably offset quickly the cost of hiring a manager.
Right. Not to mention your time.
And my time.
Because when you say cost, everybody goes to money.
That's right.
And what we never do is say, well, my time is worth X amount, and we don't go calculate that. We just say, well, you're probably paying 10% for property manager, so yeah, it's going to cost you money. But, I mean, I know you've thought this through.
Yep.
Because you think everything through when it comes to real estate. And you pay likely 10%. I don't know exactly, but it's typically 8, 9, 10%.
Yep.
And in your mind, and the reality is you probably make money on that 10%.
Yep.
Because of what you recover. Because you don't want to be the other thing too is we talk a lot about, the word design on here. I've talked to plenty of people that are landlords and managers, but never intended to be or don't even want to be now.
Yep.
And they're just like, well, I had one, and then I had two, and then this happened, and then I went and fixed it, and then they just fell, right? If you got the details on the story, they never intended to take this path, but they took the path, and now 10, 12, 15, 20 years later, they haven't switched paths.
Yep, exactly.
So the design, it's a part of everything we talk about on this show.
Yep.
The design piece should be here. Answer the question, do you want to manage real estate properties or not?
Yep.
Do you want tenants to call you when the toilet leaks?
Or not?
Answer some of these questions.
Yep.
And then know which path you're taking.
Well, when I got into the business 20 years ago, I went from learning how to generate cash, and very quickly I started to acquire cash flowing assets. And the first rental I ever bought, I bought owner financing. The seller paid all closing costs. I basically got paid to buy the house, and then I leased it with an option to purchase. So I got an option deposit and I got rent. So I walked away from closing with close to 10 grand in my pocket. Owner financing, first rental I ever bought. Now, in my first 18 to 24 months of getting into real estate, I built up a portfolio of cash flowing assets from properties that I acquired traditionally to properties that I acquired with private money to properties that I acquired as a sandwich lease option. That's probably what I did the most of, to properties that I bought subject to properties that I bought owner financing. So I bought or I controlled assets, and I had a portfolio of close to 40 houses in my first 18 to 24 months, because I realized that owning the asset or controlling the asset was the key to this real estate game. Here's what I also learned. At that time, 20 years ago, I was not near the manager that I could be today. I didn't have the skill, the knowledge, the systems process. Like, I just had never really learned those skills, and they didn't come natural to me. And so I had this portfolio, And on paper, it should have been a cash machine, right? I should have made, I don't know, probably north of 10 grand, $10,000 to $12,000 net positive cash flow on paper. Net, not gross, net cash flow.
Monthly, you're talking.
Per month.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you just said 10 to 12 grand. So
10
just
to
so everybody's on the same
$12,000
page.
per month.
Yep.
The problem was I was not a good manager. And so vacancy and tenant late pays and collections and all of this stuff, you know, ate away that cash flow because I wasn't managing it well. And so that is what informed me personally with my personal approach to then hiring a property manager and me learning to manage the manager. Let them do the work of managing the asset and me sit as the investor overseeing that service provider to do their job. Now, there's a time at which the scale of your portfolio gets to a place where, and you have to kind of make the math decision on this, right? There's a time at which the scale of your portfolio grows to a point where you have to do one of two things. You probably have to negotiate lower property management fees if you're going to outsource to a third party that you don't own, or you have to bring that in-house and either build it or acquire a property management company as part of your portfolio. For most people, they never get to that scale. I was talking to some guys a while back at a mastermind. Let's see, here's their math. They had around 1,100 houses, and I think their average rents were around $850 a month, average.
So C-grade neighborhoods?
C-grade neighborhoods, yep. So that was 1,100 houses times 850 is $935,000 a month in gross rent. And if they were paying 10%, they're paying $93,500 a month. Now, and what they did is they had, because of the scale of that operation, you know, you think about it, 500 of those houses, 700 of those houses, 800 of those houses aren't going to need anything this month.
Correct.
Right? Maybe a couple hundred of them need something, which always adds to the expense. Like the management company or the maintenance company gets paid to do the maintenance in addition to the management. Right. Management and does not include maintenance. So you're going to pay
Correct.
for those inspections, and you're going to pay for the work. You're going to pay for the materials, the labor, all of the extra things. So to manage...
do you know how many markets these 1,100 houses are in? Because I think this is an interesting... Okay.
One. So
I think that's a key part of this decision. I mean, what if they were in 25 states? 1,100 houses. That's a different network.
That's a different story.
Right.
That's a different story.
Okay, so I was just curious. One market.
But what they did is they had outsourced their property management, and they had negotiated down to 7% management fees. Because management basically gets you, is the property occupied? And how do they know if the property is occupied? Did they collect rent that month? If they didn't get rent that month, they're gonna say, they're gonna try to collect rent. They're gonna try to contact the tenant and figure out what's going on. But management and what you're paying for management is not much more than tenant screening, tenant, filling the tenant, which you pay typically first month's rent. So they're going to get paid to do that.
Yep.
And then collecting the rent. And if they don't collect the rent, they know they have an issue. Because then quarterly, they'll say, hey, do you want us to go and inspect the properties? Here's a $75, $150 quarterly inspection fee. Do you want us to do that? And so they get paid for all of the little services that they add on. So management, the management fee really covers rent collection, tenant screening, and rent collection. And rent collection, when they don't collect the rent, that tips them off to say, we have a problem.
Yep.
Okay. So to be honest, to be fair to property managers, they have a hard job on all of the little logistics beyond what we pay for management. But the management piece itself is not that hard. And so these guys I were talking to, they had 1,100 houses in one market, and they had a third-party outsourced management company. They had brought it in-house for a while, and they just like, we don't want that. That's not the life we want. That's not the business we want. So they outsourced it again, and they negotiated 7% management fee versus 10% management fee, which is a $28,000 a month delta to their cash flow,
right.
to their net cash flow.
Right.
It's pretty big numbers. And so, and yet the management company still had $64,000 a month coming in to manage the 1,100. And so if that management company is good, they have systems set up to do a lot of the leveraged heavy lifting for that. So they're making $64,000. And so, you take I don't know, let's take 64,000 divided by, let's just say you're paying somebody $72,000 a year, which is on the high side. That's 10 people that you could pay to manage those 1,100 houses. So take 1,100 houses divided by 10 people. Each person is managing 110 of the portfolio, and you don't need 10 people. Like, one person on the management side could manage more than that. And then it's the extra services where you'll start to see management companies layer on people. Now, I say all of that to say, you have to decide as you move from cash creation to cash flow building, how do you want to approach it? And personally, I outsource to a property management company, and I pay the property management company what they're worth, especially if I'm giving them not 1,100 houses. Let's say I'm giving them 20 houses or 50 houses. I'm less inclined to beat the management company up for a point or a point and a half or 2 points even on a smaller portfolio than I am as the portfolio scales and begins to grow, because I want their attention. I want them to manage my portfolio, and the small delta, the little delta on a smaller portfolio is not as significant as what we just talked about here. There's a point where scale does begin to drive. And so when you make the leap, you first have to decide, am I going to self-manage the portfolio, or am I going to manage the manager? And once you make that decision, and let's move towards the manage the manager, what does that look like? What do you have to manage, and how do you have to approach that? Because I think a lot of people get stuck on that aspect of it. And it's an interesting thought exercise to go through.
Right. And as we sort of transition here, you said the key word. Whoever you were talking to that owns the 1,100, they brought management in-house, and they decided that's not the lifestyle we want.
Yep.
If you don't want your phone blowing up at 10 p.m. about a leak because of the lifestyle component, this is a decision that you need to make intentionally. Yep. Because the way I see this, Rob, is you're the CEO of your company, whatever your company is currently doing, whether you're wholesaling or buying rentals, whatever the case. And for a company to be efficient for over a long period of time, you have to have systems.
Yep.
Or else, if you're the system and you're doing everything, you're very quickly going to burn yourself out, and your business will go away, and you'll have to go find something else to do. So there's really only two options here: either burn yourself out and be quickly out of the game, or think through and put systems in place. And so the way I see this, as you're talking about it, is a property management company is a system. And when you find a good one, it's a well-built system, and it's a proven system that for a fee of the rent, you can immediately turn on. You don't have to build it. And it takes thought, energy, effort to build a good system, any system, right? And so that's really the way that I think people need to view this is you need a good system to manage rentals.
Yep.
Either you have to think it up and build it and implement it and then drive it, or you can reach out to somebody who's already built an efficient system and just plug in.
Yep.
And it's almost like they become a division of your company.
Or the third is you can acquire an existing management company and bring them into your operation. So you can build it from scratch, you can acquire it, or you can outsource it to a third party.
Yep.
And, so then regardless of what you land on, one of the first things that a management company does is let's go to the point of I've outsourced it, I've got a portfolio. Maybe let's just say you just bought 3 new houses and you're going to, in a new market that you're going to build your portfolio in, right? You just went from phase 1 of the Freedom Formula, cash generation, and you moved to phase 2. You've got 6 months of cash expenses in the bank. And that's the point that we typically tell people. Once you've done cash creation and you've got 6 months of cash reserves, now you can continue building your cash reserves to the top of the phase 1 milestone while you start to simultaneously build your cash flow. So you did that. You got phase 1, you're moving into phase 2, you've decided to outsource to a property management company, and you just bought your first 3 rentals. Boom. What do? You hire a property management company, you interview them, and they start the process of tenant selection. And so they're going to ask you questions like, is there anything you don't want in a tenant? There's going to be a tenant questionnaire likely, or an owner's questionnaire that they'll probably send you. And what I always do is I push back and I say, well, give me your opinion. What do you think we should do? And so let me ask you this. Tenant comes in, applies, has a good job, but recently filed bankruptcy. Filed bankruptcy 6 months ago. Do you take him as a tenant or no?
You're asking me personally?
Yep.
Yeah, but you and I have had this conversation for a long time.
No.
Yeah. With solid job history, yes, because everything else just disappeared, most likely.
What does that mean?
Depending on the type of bankruptcy
everything.
it was.
What is everything else that disappeared?
Well, if it was a Chapter 7, there's likely their rent is likely the only or one of just a couple
Expenses.
monthly obligations.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, so bankruptcy, people always, I always ask that question, right? To a newer landlord or someone in the Freedom Formula moving from phase 1 to phase 2, I pose that question. Would you rent to someone who recently filed bankruptcy? And everybody says, no, I never would. No, that'd be so risky. And I said, why is it risky?
Say, send them my way.
Send them my way. And here's why. Here's why. Because your lease is not now subject to that bankruptcy. They can't, once they file bankruptcy and now have a new lease, they can't then throw your lease into the bankruptcy after the fact. They also can't file bankruptcy for 10 years, for another 10 years, and they've likely wiped out all of their other debts that they were drowning in. And so they've got free cash flow if they have a good job. If they have a job, they have the money to pay rent, and rent is probably their number one priority, and it's the most important thing that they have to pay. So I always ask that question to just reframe people's mindset a little bit on, okay, when you're managing the manager and you're answering these owner questionnaires from a management company and you're interacting with a management company, what are those key elements that you're thinking about? And this is one of the key elements that I think about.
I think a lot of property management companies have this little caveat in there. Oh, if you file bankruptcy in the last 3 years, you can't. And they would rather take somebody who who's currently paying a bunch of debts and they've got
Right.
this great credit score, that's the next candidate to file when the
Right.
hiccup happens in life.
Right.
The medical, the lost job, the whatever,
Yep.
right? And it always blew my mind as to you'd rather rent to this person who hasn't filed yet
Yep.
as opposed to the person who already has it behind them, which is a really
Yeah.
bizarre line of thinking to me.
Because I've had my leases thrown into a bankruptcy. Now, you can oftentimes get those leases released. You can get them kicked out of bankruptcy, but it buys the tenant time while they add the lease to their list of obligations in the bankruptcy. They stop paying. And you can't do anything about it for a season. And so that's one of those things. The first time I had a lease years ago, the first time I had a lease thrown into a bankruptcy, I'm like, hey, that's not right. Well, that's how the game works. And so it made me stop and think about, okay, what happened here? And like, it's not that I'm going out and looking for people that recently filed bankruptcy and trying to rent to them. But if somebody did recently file bankruptcy, I'm not opposed to renting to them at all, because I know that my lease can't get sucked into the current bankruptcy. And I know they can't file bankruptcy and suck my lease in for another 10 years.
So I have never seen specific marketing for rentals, but car dealerships do this all the time.
Yeah.
Recently filed or, recently gone through the bankruptcy scenario.
Yep.
And they know same thing.
Yep.
People need a place to stay and they need a car.
Yep.
And so they say, great, everything else just got most likely wiped out. Come on in and let's get you a new vehicle. And they place some specifics around it. But in that industry, we've all heard those commercials 1,000 times.
Yep. It's the buy here, pay here car dealership, right? It's why if you are in the owner financing business, if you're buying, renovating, and then selling owner financing, being the bank, you're selling the property owner financing to people that, for whatever reason, don't qualify, don't want, or can't get traditional financing for their personal residence. And so it's the same concept there. If they have recently filed bankruptcy, they've wiped the deep waters of debt away, and they've got the margin, the monthly cash margin to pay the most important thing. So that's just framing someone's mindset, right, on tenant selection. Another tenant selection thing that people have to think about is, are you interested in renting to a traditional, conventional tenant, or do you want to be Section 8, right? So Section 8 being government subsidized rent, and so versus conventional, meaning the person pays rent directly. And so you have to kind of decide, and you can split your portfolio. My portfolio, I'll back us up. Going into 2020, my portfolio was predominantly Section 8. I was in C to C minus grade neighborhoods predominantly, and I was 90% Section 8. And so almost all of my tenants were government subsidized income tenants. Now, the reason I made that decision intentionally, because going through the crash of 2008, and when I put that my first big fund together, Mike, you played that game with me. That's when you joined the team back then. We were buying, renovating, and selling houses to FHA home buyers because all of the conventional financing went by the wayside. Like, the only people that had the money, for the most part, were government lent money. Like, that's who they gave the money to. And so as I was watching the markets recover out of the crash and just contemplating what comes next, I started to say, well, the people that had the money last time got the money from the government. So as I build a portfolio through this rise, I want to be in a place where the government is paying rent. Now, I didn't foresee a pandemic. Maybe I should have. I didn't. I wasn't thinking that way. But when governments came in and they put moratoriums on rents for people, that conventional tenant had a moratorium, depending on what state you were in. Now, I did think about what state I was in, and my portfolio is built predominantly in red states. I'm going to go political, not blue states. So I didn't have severe moratorium pressure in 2020, like so many of my friends in other locations did. But what I did see is that even in those non-moratorium type areas, there was more challenges with the conventional tenant than the government subsidized tenant. I had 98% rent collection all through the pandemic because the government check just kept showing up. Now, what's interesting about that, and you would think that that experience and that success would have said, how do I do more of that? Well, what is interestingly evolved as those tenants have moved out over time and tenant turns happen, I look at market rent today. I've watched market rent, and market rent has gone up from where I was, even with government subsidy. It's gone up 30%. So something I was renting in the past for, say, $825 a month, all of a sudden is now renting for $1,100 a month. Well, that's a $275 per month increase in gross rent. But that's not government subsidized. That's market rent conventional tenant. So I have made a move. I have switched, and I have much less government subsidized Section 8 tenant makeup today than I used to, just because market rent has climbed so aggressively. And so, you gotta think about your portfolio makeup. Like, who are you getting your money from, right? And then that's tenant selection, things to be thinking about. Yep. Then you get down to maintenance, right? You get down to maintenance. You got to manage the manager, manage the manager. And how do you manage the manager? And how do you master this maintenance and repair thing? And I'll be honest with you, that's not always easy, because what I have found is the communication, the level of communication, both verbal and written sometimes, by the people put in charge of the maintenance crews and the management side of repairs. They don't communicate well, always. This is not a blanket statement. I'm just saying my experience has been communication with those people has been somewhat challenging at times. And
every business comes back to communication.
Every business comes back to, yeah. And what they're always thinking about is they need me to interact and tell them what I want them to do, and I want them to just take care of it and fix the house, fix the leak, do the thing. But I'll give a good example of managing the manager. I get an email a little while ago on a house, and I get an email from the property manager. And now my executive assistant is frontline on managing the manager for me. So I have put another buffer in place for me to try to get me a little bit out of it. And my executive assistant is in the front lines of managing the manager. So we get this email, and this email says, your house on XYZ, the tenant says that there's an ant infestation on the countertops. We can send out one of our guys to look at it. It'll be a $75 fee, and then whatever it takes for, whatever the cost would be for extermination, not to exceed, say, $150. So $75 for the inspection, not to exceed $150 for the extermination. So I'm $225 in, right? If I've got a $300 net cash flow on that house, I'm down to $75 that month, right? And so
it goes fast. It can
go fast. And so a tenant sends an email to the manager or calls in and complains about an ant infestation. The manager comes to me and says, $225, we'll go take care of it. You know what my reply back was? Tell the tenant to clean up the crap off their counter and put their food away and close the peanut butter jar.
Ants just don't show up randomly.
Ants just don't show up randomly. And so, like I literally said, tell the tenant to clean their countertops. And guess what I never heard again? I never heard about an ant infestation in that house.
It's like they just disappeared. It's a miracle.
And but the point here is managing the manager, like and this goes back to the root of where the money is, right? The manager made money on that $75 inspection and on the $150 extermination. Yep. They made $225 if I would have said, yeah, just handle it for me. And so I'm not saying that they were trying to, abuse me or anything, abuse the financial relationship in any way, but that's their job. Their job is to get paid to maintain, manage, and inspect beyond management itself, right? I pay them a management fee to take that tenant call, and then they charge me additional fees to go resolve those issues. And so if I would have just said, go take care of it, which sometimes I do, this one was just an obvious clean the counters, right? And so by me instructing the tenant, the manager how to respond to the tenant, it saved myself $225. The manager did that. The tenant cleaned the counters, and we were fine from there. But you have to sometimes think how you manage the manager. Like now, if there's a toilet issue, if there's something like that, or if there's a leak for some reason on something, yeah, I'm not going to say tell the tenant to fix the leak. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say go ahead, $75, go figure out what we've got to deal with, and then let me know what we are dealing with. And so managing the manager, you have to use your brain sometimes and say, do I push back hard, or is this a reasonable request?
Mm-hmm. Right. And in the last episode, we were talking about asking intelligent questions.
Yep.
So infestation is an interesting word. Did they have 8 ants they saw one day on the countertop?
Right.
Or were there 800?
Right.
And it's hard to say because this is a game of telephone through multiple channels here, right?
Yep.
Which is interesting. So knowing when, right, that communication piece,
yep,
knowing when to ask some more questions,
yep,
define infestation for me. Everybody has ants somewhere in their house.
Right.
Safe to say, right? Those little black ones are this big.
Yeah.
They can get anywhere.
Yeah.
So, and there's crumbs on everybody's floor. So, to that point, just intelligence in communication. How do we get a clear picture of what's going on? And like you said, hey, there's water coming from the second floor to the first. Okay.
Yeah,
we got a problem.
That's right. And here's what I want people to hear. I want people to hear this. There's a couple things. Number one, when you move from phase 1 of cash creation to cash flow generation, when you move to cash flow and you start to acquire assets, your job is to provide a clean, safe, and functional, livable place. Clean, safe, and functional. Okay? It has to be clean. That's your job. It has to be safe. That's your job. It has to be functional. That's your job. Now, every neighborhood has maybe a different level of, do I need $1 million drywall work in a $100,000 neighborhood? No, I don't. So there's levels of how much money you have to put into the repairs and what needs to be repaired, but it has to be clean. It has to be safe. It has to be functional. because I want people to understand this. When you move to the cash flow creation and you start to think about the hierarchy, this triangle of hierarchy of your business, the top of the pyramid is the tenant. Because nobody else gets paid if the tenant doesn't pay. So your job is to serve the tenant. I want people to hear, because, you know, we're talking about manage the manager, and I'm using this example of pushing back on the tenant. I'm not pushing back on the tenant just because, you know, I'm the landlord and they're the tenant. No. They are at the top of the pyramid. I serve them. And if I serve them well, they pay. If they don't pay, nobody ain't making no money. Right?
That's a big mindset shift, because I know a lot of landlords view it. You're my tenants, pay me. There is no servant component to it.
No.
What's interesting about real estate is, and what you'll find talking to potential sellers, real estate is almost always, not 100%, but it's almost always emotionally charged.
Yes.
In some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
All right? I had a really funny story that I'm going to tell about this. I bought this house that was lived in by a guy's mom for 45 years. He grew up in the house down by DU in Denver.
Yep.
Okay? She gets to the point, she's had multiple birthdays, can't stay in the house by herself. So he has this great plan. House right next door to him goes for sale. He said, if I could sell mom's house, I could buy this one right next door, and he and his wife could take care of her because they would live next door to each other, right? So fast forward, this works out. I buy old house, lived in house, moves mom in next door. I do this full renovation. It was it was built in the 60s. So we opened up the kitchen and we made it really killer. And he's in the neighborhood one day and he shoots me a text, Mike, I'm in the neighborhood and I saw the lockbox. Can I take mom through it? And I said, absolutely. Because it was now listed or under contract or whatever the case. It was a fix and flip that I did. Send him the lockbox, get it back. I don't hear anything from him. So he had a sewer scope business. So I used him all the time. So next time we're doing a scope, I said, hey, you guys went through the house. What'd you think of it? What'd your mom think of it? And he said, I thought it was beautiful. He goes, my mom hated it. And he starts laughing. But here's why. We changed her house.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? 40 years worth of memories were inside that place. So here's the point. When you manage and own real estate, people are building memories in your house. So I appreciate that you didn't downplay the fact that you have a response. If you don't want the responsibility of providing functioning, safe, clean homes to people, then don't. Stay out of being a landlord.
Yep.
Because you view it as an investment. The person that lives there views it as a home. Yep. This is where my kids were born. This is where memories are made.
Yep.
It's emotionally charged almost every time.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly.
It's great that you brought it up.
Well, I think it's important. It's an important aspect mentally for people to land on and understand, because when you move from that phase 1 to phase 2 and you start to build your portfolio, you are taking a new level of responsibility on, right? And so, and it's also why phase 1 is cash generation. And phase 2 is cash flow creation, because guess what comes also with owning a portfolio? Expenses.
Right. Renovation.
Right? Renovations and tenant turns and repairs and a broken window and an insurance premium or an insurance deductible or, whatever it is. I've got a house right now. Went vacant, was on the tenant turn. As the house was vacant and we were about to start the renovation for the little tenant turn, the little tenant cleanup, it was going to cost me $3,000 to go in and tune this house up and get it rented again. Somebody parks a stolen car in the backyard. They drive the stolen car through the
fence,
through the carport, and into the backyard, and it's parked back there. Well, the police see it, right, or the neighbors call it in, or somehow they figure out that this is there. So the police department hires a tow truck to go out and recover this vehicle. Nobody tells me. Nobody tells the owner. Nobody tells the manager. Nobody says anything. They just go out there and hook up to this car, and the tow truck driver, as he's pulling away, maybe I told this story a couple weeks ago, I don't remember.
I heard something about it.
But he destroys the freaking house. He destroys the carport. It pulls part of the roof off. He breaks the brick, like he cracks the brick. He rips the electrical panel off the side of the house.
Wow.
Like this guy had to be
First day on the job, tow truck driver.
Oblivious.
Right.
Anyway, so long story short,
Yeah.
I'm in the, I'm dealing with, I'm managing now the insurance claim.
Right.
And then I'm managing the manager to get the repairs done. To, a $3,500 repair turned into a $24,000 repair.
Right.
And lost rent as a result, and that, all the stuff that goes along with it. And so, anyway, what I want people to get out of this is that the responsibility that you land at when you move into that second phase is great, but with great responsibility comes great reward. Mm-hmm. And the income, the equity buildup, the principal pay down if it's financed, the depreciation benefits, all of the side benefits of real estate are great if you approach it with the right mindset, if you buy right to begin with, manage well during your ownership, and execute your investment strategy well, which is what we try to teach people to do. We talk to people about how do you think about this challenge or that challenge, because challenges come up, right? They always come up, and you're always solving a problem. And so the better you get at being able to solve a problem quickly and easily and have somebody else to kick that off or to solve in a way that somebody else has been through, right? Somebody's already been around that blind corner. This whole game becomes easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, let's wrap it up. Let's show off. We did pull the pictures. We did pull the pictures. There's Henry sitting in the stream, and he's got a whomper,
Yep.
a whomper of a fish there.
Yep. Good looking fish.
Good looking little fish. Now he does have.
Oh, good.
Check that one. Check out that white fish that he's got.
All white fish yesterday.
Yeah, all
Wherever
white fish.
they were, yeah.
I think was this on the snake? I think this was on the snake. I don't know.
What skier is in the back? That's Jackson, right?
That's got to be Jackson Hole. So I don't know if that's the snake that goes right through there. I know the snake goes south towards the reservoir.
Yeah.
But anyway, little white fish. So that's
Love
Henry.
So Joe, go back to the first picture. This hat.
I love it.
I do too. But he bought it sight unseen. He ordered it off a website. I get people do this. I couldn't even. I was like, how do you know it looks good on? And he goes, I don't. Ordered it anyway.
How do you know it fits? I don't.
I said that too. I said, how do you know it fits? And he fires back at me. He goes, because I know what size hat I wear. I was like, quality control.
Yeah.
Just because.
Hilarious.
Just because when you're buying pants, just because it says this size, that doesn't mean it was built perfect. And he goes, hey, this is a good company. The hat's going to fit. Like, all right.
That's funny.
Seemed gutsy to me, but it worked.
Mindset.
Love it. Love it.
Amazing.
All right, guys. Well, hey, that's a wrap. Another show in the books. Thanks for coming into the studio, guys, and carrying the conversation with me. Listen, if you guys like this, do us a favor. Share this on your favorite podcast player. Share this on your favorite social media site. This episode has been brought to you by FreedomSoft once again. And with that being said, if you like it, tell others about it, and we'll be back again. Cheers.